This video will cover methods of recording the DX7, but the tips could be used with other keyboards and drum machines. I'm recording a demo song of Off the Matrix patches, so I'll share the process. The Old Rhodes patch sounds really great through an amp, so I would going to show methods of recording it through. So one thing I will say is a few weeks ago, I decided to go through some banks I found on the web of other patches created by others, and I actually found a bank titled Rhodes, but it was just variations of the famous DX7 electric piano patch. And it was just 32 variations of this, and none of them came close to sounding of having that snarling sound that I created, which really, it took me months to get this right. So now I'm going to go through the process. I'm using a Roland KC550 to record, but it doesn't really matter which model you use because I don't have it all the way up. I have it set for the DX7 and the drum machine on the V50 around 4. And it's pretty loud even at 4. When I listen to the Old Rhodes patch through headphones, I do notice it has a boomy low-end quality, which isn't so noticeable when I play it through the amp. I've been reading up on different lit pieces of how others record. I have this CD-ROM that's great of Keith Emerson, and he used pretty much the standard setup of using the go-to mic, this SM57 by Shure. And the Shure 57, it's sort of at the edge of the speaker, about 2 or 3 inches from it. It's hard to see with this angle, but that's why I place that close to get the main body of the tone. Then on the other side, I have this studio condenser mic. You can pretty much use any mic, but I'm using an Audio-Technica AT440. Now I have the studio condenser mic around 3 feet from the amp to capture the reverberation of the room. And the room's around 18 feet one way and 12 feet, so it's a pretty good sized room. I find it's best to pre-record the tracks into a sequencer, because if you try to record directly through the amps with the microphones, you're going to hear a clicking noise of you hitting the keys. So now I'll play back the sequence first, going directly in with the lines into the Chronos. So there's no confusion. What you just heard was the sound of the DX7 line output going directly into the Chronos. So now I'll show how I set up the microphones. And I seem to get the best results when I panned the Shure 57 towards the center to here it's saying 40, so it's pretty close to the center. And then the right channel, that's the condenser mic, is panned all the way to the right. So that seemed to give me the best stereo image where the reverberation is coming from the right channel and the main focus of the tone is coming from the left. Now I'll play back the recording that I made with the microphones through the amp. Yeah, I still notice this boomy sound in the recording in the lower end. So I know with SY99, it has a high pass filter. So I usually set that around 200 Hertz to cut out that boominess. I'm using the drum machine on the V50 for the drum track, and I actually found that I got the best results from playing this through the amp. So first I'll play it directly from the lines input to the mixer, and then I'll play it through the amp. So this is just the sound of it going through the mixer. I'm usually not satisfied with sampled hi-hats, so I actually synthesized an FM hi-hat on the V50 that I think has more of a natural quality, because samples, it's just one sample you're triggering, it's always the same with every note, but because there are 4 operators interacting, it has a different tone every time you hit it. Yeah, now I'll run it through the amp, and it has much more of a natural acoustic sound. Yeah, the sound that you just heard was not coming from the Shure 57 and the studio condenser. It was actually just the microphone of the cell phone. I just recorded that clip and it sounded so good on the cell, I decided to keep it. And I think it's because the cell phone was placed above the amp and it caught more of the reverberation of the room. So above all, it's a matter of experimenting. And this method could also be used with any drum machine. I'm going to use the Yamaha TX802 to record the DX7 demo song. And I did a review of this last week, so if you missed that, you can go back 1 week. I have it set up for the demo song. In the first part, I'm playing this effects guitar. And I found the best way to EQ that is the same way as EQing the Rhodes patch with the low end. And then of course I have like other patches set up, like this is the bass, which I'll just leave it flat with no EQ. This is my mixer and what I use for EQ. So what I notice that the sound is too boomy, as I mentioned before. So by dropping the range of starting around 200 Hertz down to 100, it takes out that boominess. But what I found is good though with this Behringer mixer is if I drop the low EQ low, it takes out the same range. So then I also use this setup for other sounds. Let's see, where's the guitar? Now here's the phaser guitar I like. So fortunately, if I drop the EQ, it makes it less boomy in the low range. Same thing. And as I mentioned a few weeks ago, the French horn is another sound where you want to drop the low EQ. Because all these sounds are being generated with sine waves, what I find is the fundamental is too strong. So by dropping the low EQ, you take that out, that boominess out. Yeah, it's also important to have a significant amount of reverb on some of the patches like this French horn. Because if you just play this flat, like without any effects, it's just not have the same, theatrical quality. But I will mention there's another patch I edited for this demo song. Let's see. The patch Sonic Wing. But the way I had it programmed in the original version had this higher overtone for the first tower. I wanted to sort of give this kind of ethereal tone. So I dropped that down to 0 to take that higher octave overtone out. But actually, this is the patch that I use for the intro. So I may do a tutorial because in the intro, I had a low LFO setting that it had it modulate at the end. So I'm always, talking about how to get the most out of the patches. So be sure to subscribe.